Your mother says she's proud of you, but her eyes tell a different story. Your best friend celebrates your growth, but you feel something cold beneath the warmth. Your partner claims they want you to thrive, but they subtly undermine every step you take. They say they love you. They might even believe they love you, but there's something else lurking underneath, something they'll never admit, not even to themselves. Carl Jung had a name for this: shadow envy. He discovered that the people closest to awakened individuals often carry a hidden resentment so deep they can't consciously acknowledge it. They don't hate you. They hate what you represent. And the more you awaken, the more their unconscious envy intensifies, disguised as love, concern, or protection. Today I'm revealing why Jung believed that awakened people inevitably trigger envy in those who claim to love them most. Why this envy is so dangerous precisely because it's unconscious, and how to recognize it before it destroys you. Here's what Jung understood that changes everything. Envy doesn't always look like jealousy. It doesn't announce itself. When someone is conscious of their envy, they either work through it or distance themselves. But unconscious envy is different. It masquerades as love while slowly poisoning the relationship. Jung discovered this pattern repeatedly in his patients. A woman would describe a supportive mother who somehow always made her feel smaller. A man would talk about a loving partner who celebrated his successes while subtly sabotaging his confidence. Friends who cheered for your victories while their energy felt like ice. These people aren't lying when they say they love you. They're unconscious. Their ego genuinely believes it loves you, but their shadow, the disowned, rejected parts of themselves, envies everything you've become. And because they can't acknowledge this envy, it leaks out in ways that feel like love, but function like poison. Jung called this the betrayal of the unconscious, when someone's shadow uses their love as a vehicle for destruction. And awakened people experience this constantly because their very existence triggers the shadow material in everyone around them. The first way this shows up is the most painful. Jung's first insight: awakened people trigger envy because their freedom reflects everyone else's self-imposed prison. You're not trying to make them feel trapped, but your liberation makes their cage visible, and they resent you for it. Think about what happens when you wake up. You leave the soul-crushing job, you end the toxic relationship, you stop performing for approval, you're finally free. And the people who claim to love you should be celebrating, right? But instead, you feel resistance. Your mother says, "I'm just worried about you. Are you sure this is wise?" Your friend says, "I support you, but don't you think you're being impulsive?" They frame it as love. It's envy. One of Jung's patients, a woman who left a prestigious career to pursue art, described her family's reaction. They said they wanted me to be happy. But every conversation was about how risky my choice was, how I was throwing my life away. It took me years to realize they weren't concerned, they were envious. I'd escaped a prison they were still living in, and my freedom made their captivity unbearable. This is what Jung meant by the mirror of freedom. Your awakened choices reflect back to them all the choices they didn't make, all the risks they didn't take, all the cages they built and locked themselves inside. And instead of using your example as inspiration, their shadow uses it as evidence of their own failure. But here's the insidious part. They don't experience this as envy. They experience it as love. I'm trying to protect you. I'm worried about your well-being. Their conscious mind genuinely believes they're being caring. Their unconscious knows they're trying to get you back in the cage with them, because your freedom is too painful to witness. Jung was clear. The people who truly love you will feel temporary discomfort at your freedom, then celebrate it. The people whose love is mixed with unconscious envy will consistently, subtly, relentlessly try to pull you back down. Not because they're evil, because your ascent highlights their refusal to climb. But if you think your freedom is threatening, wait until you hear what really triggers their unconscious rage. This is Jung's most devastating insight. Awakened people trigger envy because their authenticity exposes everyone else's performance. You're not trying to shame anyone, but when you stop performing, their masks become visible, and they hate you for it. Before awakening, you were performing too. Playing the role, wearing the mask, and everyone around you could relate. You were all performing together, and the mutual performance felt like connection. But then you woke up. You dropped the mask. You started speaking your truth. You became real. And suddenly, everyone else's performance became glaringly obvious, to them and to you. Jung observed this with a patient who stopped performing the happy wife role. She started expressing real feelings, setting real boundaries, showing up authentically. And her husband, who claimed to love her, became enraged, not overtly, subtly, through passive aggression, withdrawal, subtle criticism disguised as concern. She told Jung, "He said he wanted me to be myself, but the moment I actually was myself, he couldn't handle it. He wanted me to be myself, within the acceptable parameters of the role he needed me to play. My real self didn't fit that role." This is the shadow envy at work. Your authenticity doesn't just expose their performance, it demands they either become authentic too, or admit they're choosing falseness. Most people can't tolerate that level of self-awareness, so instead, their shadow attacks your authenticity while their ego claims to support it. You'll hear things like, "I miss when you were more easygoing." Translation, "I miss when you pretended problems didn't exist. You've become so intense." Translation, "Your depth makes my shallowness uncomfortable. You're taking this too seriously." Translation, "Your authenticity is making my performance harder to maintain." Jung called this the intolerance of authenticity. Unconscious people can't tolerate authentic people because authentic presence highlights their inauthenticity. And rather than do the work of becoming authentic themselves, their shadow envies and attacks those who already are. But the envy goes even deeper when they see something happening to you that terrifies them about themselves. Here's what Jung discovered about the deepest source of shadow envy. Awakened people trigger envy because their growth highlights everyone else's stagnation. You're not trying to make them feel stuck, but your evolution makes their lack of evolution impossible to ignore. You're changing, learning, evolving, integrating your shadow, expanding your consciousness. Every month, every year, you're different, deeper, wiser, more whole. And the people who claim to love you are exactly the same as they were 5 years ago. Same patterns, same complaints, same avoidance. They're not growing, they're circling. And your growth makes their circle visible. Jung treated a man whose father had always said, "I'm so proud of you, son." But as the son continued his individuation journey, therapy, shadow work, spiritual practice, the father's pride began to curdle. Subtle criticisms appeared. "You're overthinking everything. You're becoming too introspective," all disguised as fatherly concern. The son told Jung, "My father wasn't proud of my growth. He was threatened by it. Because every step I took forward highlighted that he'd been standing still his entire life. My evolution was a mirror of his stagnation." This is shadow envy in its purest form. They unconsciously think, "I'm jealous of your growth." They think, Something's wrong with how much you're changing. Their ego frames your growth as your problem. Their shadow knows it's revealing their failure to grow. You'll hear, "You've changed so much," said with concern, not celebration. "I liked you better before you started doing the work they were avoiding. You're becoming someone I don't recognize." Because they've refused to evolve while you've continued becoming. But there are two final ways this envy manifests that Jung considered the most dangerous of all. If you're recognizing these patterns, if the people who claim to love you consistently undermine your freedom, attack your authenticity, or resent your growth, Jung would say you're not imagining it. Shadow envy is real. Before we continue, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Now, these final two patterns reveal why this envy is so dangerous. This is Jung's most crucial insight. Awakened people trigger envy because their consciousness threatens everyone's unconscious patterns. Your awareness makes their unconsciousness harder to maintain, and they resent you for disrupting the system. Every family, every relationship, every social group has unconscious patterns, unspoken rules, agreed upon avoidances, roles that everyone plays to keep the system stable. And these patterns only work if everyone remains unconscious of them. But then you wake up, you see the patterns, you recognize the roles, and even if you don't say anything, your consciousness disrupts everything because you're no longer unconsciously participating. Jung worked with a woman whose entire family system was built on avoiding conflict, pretending everything was fine, never discussing real feelings. She was the peacekeeper. Then she awakened. She started naming the patterns, setting boundaries, refusing to play her role. Her family's response, "You're tearing this family apart. You're causing problems where there weren't any." They framed her consciousness as the problem. But what really happened? Her awareness threatened the unconscious system they had built their entire dynamic around. She told Jung, "They said they loved me, but they loved the unconscious version who played her role. The conscious version who could see the dysfunction and refused to enable it. She was a threat." This is why awakened people often lose their families, their old friends, their established relationships. Not because they're rejecting these people, because their consciousness makes unconscious patterns unsustainable. And rather than evolving the patterns, people often choose to exile the conscious person. You become the problem, the troublemaker, when really you're just the one who woke up and refused to go back to sleep. And that refusal triggers deep shadow envy in everyone who's still choosing unconsciousness. But there's one final way this envy shows up that completes the picture. Jung's final insight. Awakened people trigger envy because their boundaries reveal everyone's hidden need for control. Your clear boundaries expose their attempts to control you, and they hate you for it. Before awakening, you probably had weak boundaries. You said yes when you meant no. You tolerated disrespect. You were accessible, malleable, controllable. And the people in your life got comfortable with that level of access and control. But awakening changes everything. You develop boundaries. You say no. You protect your energy. You become less accessible, less controllable. And the people who claim to love you experience this as rejection, abandonment, betrayal. Jung treated a patient whose mother had always said, "We're so close. We tell each other everything." Translation, "I have unlimited access to you." When the patient started setting boundaries, not sharing every detail, limiting phone calls, saying no to demands, the mother's love turned to ice. She said, "I'd become cold, distant, selfish." the patient told Jung. But what I'd actually become was boundaried. Her closeness was actually enmeshment. My boundaries highlighted her lack of boundaries, and she hated me for it. This is shadow envy's final form. Resentment that you can protect yourself when they can't. That you can say no when they can't. Your boundaries aren't an attack, but they feel like one to someone whose entire identity is built on having no boundaries. You'll hear, "You've become so selfish." Translation, "You're not prioritizing my needs over your own anymore. You're pushing everyone away." Translation, "You're not allowing me unlimited access." Jung was clear. People who truly love you will respect your boundaries. People whose love is mixed with unconscious envy will consistently violate, test, or guilt you about your boundaries. Because your limits reveal their attempts at control, and they can't tolerate that mirror. Why awaken people trigger envy in those who pretend to love them? Your freedom reflects their cage. Your authenticity exposes their performance. Your growth highlights their stagnation. Your consciousness threatens their unconscious patterns. Your boundaries reveal their need for control. This isn't about vilifying anyone. Most people carrying shadow envy have no idea they're doing it. Their conscious mind genuinely believes they love you. Their shadow is operating completely unconsciously. They're not evil, they're unconscious. Jung would want you to understand, this isn't your fault. You're not triggering them by being difficult. You're triggering their shadow by being awake. And that's inevitable. The more conscious you become, the more unconscious people's shadows will react to your presence. Not because you're doing anything wrong, because you're doing everything right. If you're experiencing this, if the people who claim to love you consistently undermine, criticize, or resent your awakening, Jung would say, trust what you feel, not what they say. Shadow envy is real, and it's not something you can fix, heal, or love away in the other person. They have to become conscious of it themselves. Your job is to recognize it, name it internally, protect yourself from it, and understand that you may need to distance yourself from people whose unconscious envy is damaging you, even if they're family, even if they've always been there, even if they mean well. Jung believed that awakened individuals often face a painful choice: maintain relationships with unconscious people at the cost of dimming their light, or honor their awakening at the cost of those relationships. Most awakened people discover they can't do both. Not everyone who loves you can love your awakening. Not everyone who wants you in their life wants you conscious. And learning to distinguish true love from shadow envy disguised as love. That's one of the most important skills you'll develop on this journey. Subscribe to explore Jung's insights on navigating awakening while surrounded by unconsciousness. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.